What's going on? I'm Jeff St. Pierre, and this is episode 178 of the Adult Education Podcast. This was a special conversation for me because I got to talk to two guys that created something that brought my friends and I so much joy growing up. Today, we are talking about Eastbay. All right, I'm going to start by telling you a little story. So when I got to high school, I was very excited about getting a locker. We had lockers in middle school, but they changed each year. You got a new locker when you moved to a different grade. But in high school, oh man, it was a different ballgame there. You got your locker and it was yours for 4 years. Now, throughout my freshman year, I would go through mail order catalogs like the skateboarding catalog CCS or Burton snowboarding catalog. I bought so many stickers to put all over my locker. By the end of my freshman year, I had a pretty awesome setup that I was excited to keep for the next 3 years. I was ready. Then, for some reason, everyone in my block of lockers got a letter saying that they were going to have to move us to a new space. No warning. It came over the summer, so I couldn't even try to get my artwork back. Everything I had built ended up going to some other kid. Kind of bummed me out, clearly, because it's been 30 years and I'm still talking about it. I think the saddest part of the story for me is when I got my new locker, I never even put anything in it at all for the next 3 years. I wasn't about to waste my time and my money again. You know, what, fool me once, right? I'm telling you this story because mail order catalogs were a big part of my teenage experience. In the 90s, before internet shopping became easy and readily accessible, that's how you found out about the newest stuff. I had catalogs for snowboarding, Christmas gifts, punk rock music, and there was the granddaddy of them all, the Eastbay catalog. If you weren't lucky enough to experience the Eastbay catalog, it was a thing of beauty. It had all the latest and hottest sneakers to come out on the market. The catalog was launched to help bring state-of-the-art shoes to high school athletes that didn't have access to them. As it grew, Eastbay became the place to go to find your new kicks. I have distinct and very fond memories of my friends and I sitting around the catalog discussing which shoes we wanted to get. I remember going into school with the catalog and talking about stuff with other kids as well. When the Eastbay catalog arrived in mailboxes, it was a big deal and probably a huge distraction in school as well. Juedes and Rick Gering are the creators of Eastbay, and they've told their story in a new book called The Book of Eastbay, Two Friends and the Catalog That Changed the Sneaker Business Forever. Boy, they can definitely say that. I can't say enough kind things about these guys. They were a joy to speak with. And Art actually listened to a few episodes of this show before coming on. That's not something that I'm normally accustomed to. I just don't really ever expect guests to listen before they come on, but it does mean a lot when they do. You'll notice at the beginning of this conversation, he does ask me a couple of questions about things I referenced in previous episodes, just so that makes a little bit more sense for you. But here we go. Let's talk to Rick and Art. I hope you enjoyed the conversation and the story of Eastbay. And forgive me, I've been doing the podcast for about 6 years. I started in early of 2020, so a little over 6 years. As I mentioned, I've been broadcasting for 25 years. This was just kind of a way to, test my chops in different ways and talk to people that I thought were interesting.
So what have you learned over the 6 years?
A lot of stuff, man. A lot of stuff. The podcast started for me as sort of like a health and wellness thing. But then as that started to take a little bit of a turn into weird directions, I said, I don't really want to be a part of this world anymore. So I just started investigating a whole lot of other stuff. And it's taken me, I just interviewed a guy that was in the world of wrestling for a long time. That was fascinating to hear how he kind of helped launch WWE and all that. Just so many different things I never thought I would have conversations with people about.
And there's so many things out there. People who don't even do anything big have amazing stories of doing simple things that help other people get better. So yeah.
They really do. And I remember talking to one of your publicists and she sent me the list of books that were coming out. And I said, oh my God, you've got a book about Eastbay coming? And it was a really good trip down memory lane. I've been so excited to read this book and learn more about the catalog that I loved when I was younger and had so much fun with.
Hey, how are you feeling? Yeah, I said on a couple of your podcasts before, it said you were not feeling well.
Oh, yeah, right. I kind of forget how much I divulged when I was talking about this, but I basically was just having this like nonstop feeling of motion sickness, like 24 hours a day motion sickness. I did get some glasses. That has been helping. I think I was having some issues with looking at screens all day, and my eyes are not as strong as they used to be as I get a little bit older. I think that's been helping, and overall, it's been a lot better. So, yes, I am doing good. Thank you very much for asking. That actually means a lot. I appreciate that. Are you guys still both in Wisconsin?
We're in Naples, Florida right now. We were just in Wisconsin this weekend.
Okay.
back in Wausau.
Nice. So you still have ties there and still,
We did a little book signing there.
Yeah.
Kind of launched the book. So.
I gotta tell you, I've always been fascinated by sneakers, but I never realized how big the sneakerhead world was until probably about 14 years ago. I was living in an apartment complex that kind of butted up against a mall, and I was doing morning radio, so I'd leave my house at like 3:30 a.m. to go into the studio. I walk out the door and I see this line of people at the mall wrapped around the corner. And I'm like, the mall doesn't open till 10 a.m. What are all these people doing here in the middle of the night? And I found out it was a shoe drop for something. I said, people line up for shoes? I had never witnessed this in my life, but that's when I was like, wow, there's like a real, avid and rabid fan base for these sneakers that are coming out now.
Yeah, the business has evolved so much. It's so big.
And the companies used to hide that part of the business sort of because when they all first kind of started growing up, they were thinking that we've got to go to the athletes. The athletes are what is going to drive everything, and they've done that. They've created the interest from the athletes, and they kept in the back. They kept celebrating going to the athletes and secretly celebrating that they're getting this other 70% of the market by going through the athletes, but it was that 70% of the market that is where they're making the money. And now they're really coming right out in front of your face and saying, we're going after the 70% of the market.
I guess at least they're telling us now.
Yeah.
It is interesting reading a story like yours because it takes you through all these different eras of time. And to think about a time where, you talk about having to have lines of credit with the shoe companies because they didn't have salespeople that were going out on their own. You were essentially the salespeople for the shoes in a lot of ways. It's interesting to think there was a time where that was the case. And it's so fascinating to learn more about that.
Well, and that was always one of the scary parts is that we made the choice to go directly to the athletes immediately right away as a way to separate ourselves from other retailers or other businesses. And we knew that as much as we didn't know about the business, that we could do this and we were pretty good at it. And we just couldn't understand why bigger people didn't come in and do the same thing and why Nike didn't start off going directly to the athletes. So that was always in the back of our mind is we knew they're going to come at this eventually. And once the internet became available and the access became different, or the avenues of access became different, they started going direct to the consumer. So tried to make hay while we could.
Oh, absolutely. And I don't want to diminish anything that you guys did, but I guess you would say that without the coaches back in the early days, this thing might not have gotten off the ground. The coaches were a major player in helping Eastbay kind of develop the way that you did.
Oh, definitely. We grew, like you were talking about this nostalgia. Mm-hmm. When we grew up there, we ended up sending, 8-10 million young people, high school athletes in the end. Started with zero. There was no one to send to, no place to advertise. There were no names to buy that you could send them to. This was, mail order was just starting, all that. We started, Rick's idea was just, let's get the best possible shoes we could. And it started with track to the local athletes, to athletes in northern Wisconsin. And then when we ran out of how many miles we could drive on the road, we started, let's put somehow we decided to go catalog, not more stores like everybody else. Different paradigm shift for us, for the business even. And we grew always by sending the coaches. That was the only list we had. We knew there was a coach at a school, so we'd send the basketball coach at these schools. So whenever we wanted to expand, we didn't send a list of athletes in Alabama or in California or something like that. We sent the coaches. Mm-hmm. So when we started, it was Wisconsin and 4 states around. We did okay, didn't go out of business yet. Then we did another 5 states around that, or 6 states. And just every year we'd add another 8-9 states till we finally felt we had enough inventory really to service going to the coast and everything. So that's pretty much, we grew through the coaches, and the coaches they'd show the athletes, and the athletes would say, hey, I'd like one of these catalogs, and they'd call in, and eventually we ended up sending it all to the athletes. And the coaches would say, we don't have time to do this anymore. You guys just send me 20 catalogs.
Yeah.
So.
I do love the beginning of your story really goes back to the very beginning and how you guys were born in the same hospital, a couple days apart, were in the same nursery together, eventually moved a couple doors down from each other. I think it's amazing that you were able to continue this friendship for so many years of your lives and through business. I mean, a business with a friend is a hard thing to do.
It's been, at least for us, it's been more natural than unnatural, because we literally grew up together. He saved my life. I've saved his life. The trust is there, and he's good sometimes at things that I'm not good at, and I'm good sometimes at things that he's not good at, but yet we trade back and forth. He'll have a great idea, and I'll help come up with a way to make it work, or I'll have an idea, and he'll come up with a way to make it work. So we've just totally exchanged ideas and ways to make things work our whole lives.
I think it's also impressive you both got thrown out of kindergarten, which I think, deserves a special award. To be able to bother a kindergarten teacher that much, you get thrown out of class. That's impressive, guys.
Well, and we learned to be consistent about that. So we were thrown out a lot, and that consistency made a difference in business. There's no question about it.
I remember getting thrown out of confirmation class at one point and thinking that was impressive for me, but kindergarten, that's a whole different level. That's a whole
Well, we were having fun even back then.
I love that. Your story gives me hope too, because my daughter is graduating from her preschool and she's been with the same 4 kids since she was 2 years old. And every one of them is going to a different school next year, a different elementary school. And it kind of breaks my heart because they are so close to each other and the parents all get along really well. But I read your story and I think, okay, there's hope. We can make this work. We can continue these friendships down the line.
Absolutely. Well, we hope she does, but she's going to, I'm sure, make new friends, and which will be a good thing too. She'll add to the pot of friends.
Well, those are fun times.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Good for you. You got a lot of fun things to look forward to.
It is an exciting time. She's a wild kid, and I love every second of
Soon
it.
she'll be buying sneakers. Sorry.
Oh, she's already very opinionated about shoes. If we had the Eastbay catalog now, if we could go back 15, 20 years, she would be circling everything just the way that I did when my friends and I would get the catalog at home.
Yeah, that was always one of the nice things that parents would call and say, when you get the catalog, my daughter and I, or my son and I would go through the catalog and pick his next shoes for whatever he was going to play and stuff like that. So it was almost like a little bit of a family thing at times.
And we learned so much selling kids' shoes. I mean, it was one thing to sell, I'll say men's size 7 and above, people who are into those sizes. But when we first started selling kids' shoes, we thought, wow, we're selling a lot of shoes. They're just flying out the door. And what happened was that we would send, a parent would think they knew the size. They would order a size 2, and we would send it to them, and they needed a size 3. So we were reselling all these kids' shoes until we finally figured it out that we weren't selling that many kids' shoes. We were just replacing ones that they ordered incorrectly. So it was
kids' shoes are hard.
Experience along the way.
I thought we're doing great.
Yeah.
It was just double the sales.
Get rid of the Shaquille O'Neals and the Kevin Durant's of the world. Let's just do little kids.
Right?
We had a totally bad idea. Totally bad idea.
There was also a point where at the beginning you offered a lot more women's shoes. And I don't know if people really fully grasp that even in the early 80s, it was still difficult for women to find the things they needed for athleticism and exercise. I mean, that wasn't as common in stores as people might think it was then. So you really did something very different by adding in so many women's options.
Well, we also, I think in the early 90s, 92 or 93, we made a women's only catalog, a few of them. And I think we started basketball and soccer and that. It was just really hard to find enough women's shoes to fill it up.
Yeah, it was what, almost 80% men's shoes, smaller sized men's shoes, because the companies just weren't making enough women's product.
Well, and I coached women's basketball at one time, girls basketball when I came back from Racine, where I was coaching men's. It was good to see it. Sue Bird wrote a whole thing when we closed, when Eastbay closed, and she said, "Oh, I loved having all my shoes from there and everything." So I felt good about that.
Oh, I'm sure the impact you had on all of the athletes of the last couple of decades. I mean, I'm sure so many of them grew up looking at Eastbay catalogs, and then some of them even went on to have their own shoes, probably in Eastbay catalogs at some point. But I mean, just the impact that Eastbay had on so many young kids playing sports and and growing over the years. It's got to feel incredible for you two because you both started working with young athletes. To just watch that grow and see that to go for so many years like that, it must make you feel good to look back on it.
Oh, certainly.
And there's so much you didn't know because Kevin Durant's mom called in, not Kevin Durant, and he was young enough that he wasn't the real Kevin Durant yet. So you didn't always know who was calling in or where they might end up. And so it took a number of years before they got to the point where you would know their name and you knew who they were. And you got lucky enough that sometimes they called back with their own, without either not an assistant or a parent. They called back once, a few times by themselves. And so we got to learn that, we had quite a fair amount of amazing athletes.
There's an element at the beginning, sort of the beginning of the story, where I kept thinking about the movie Air that came out, where they talk about the creation of the Jordans. And I was thinking, like, there really was a technological change in the early 80s when it came to sneakers, because there were guys that were still playing sports in the Converse, the standard Chuck Taylors out there playing basketball. And then things really started to change rapidly. It was almost like right place, right time for Eastbay in a way to get in there and start helping to expose people that didn't have access to athletic shoe stores to all these different options and different things.
The right place, right time. We look at back so much. So our first color catalog came out. So we had gone just to drive in there. So we'll make a couple black and white little things, mailers and that. And we got a little bit bigger, and then we went to color. And it was color. Our first color catalog came out when the Jordan came out, the Jordan and the Dunks. Talk about perfect timing. And before the Jordan, we bet a lot on the Jordan. If that didn't sell, we were out of business. Before the Jordan, though, I think everyone looked at athletic footwear as a piece of equipment. And after those, it became a part of identity. It was always like, if I look great in a shoe, I'm going to play great. So I'm going to run faster, jump higher. So we were right there almost at the Wizard of Oz moment for athletic footwear.
And we were still trying to figure things out. So we were still learning, how do we grow our inventory? How do we make these catalogs? How do we find names? How do we, develop a better relationship with the coaches and the athletes? And then the companies come out, like Art said, they came out with their colored shoes. But we went from, I think it was 85. We went from 27 models of basketball shoes to the next year we had 62. So we were just figuring out, how do we order 27 models correctly? And the next year they made us figure out, how do you order 62 models correctly? So it's certainly been a real learning experience.
And also, to stay in that time frame, the impact of television also, I hadn't really thought about that, but you talk about that in the book, about how ESPN putting games on TV, and MTV, which was kind of getting the crossover between sports and entertainment. And you had, artists like Run DMC, for example, rocking the Adidas stuff everywhere. Like, there was the TV element and cable TV that people were seeing these things. People that were not necessarily athletes were seeing athletic shoes in a different way than they had been before. And that also opened the door and helped Eastbay kind of get into those homes as well.
Yeah, when we started, there was only one NBA game a week. You really couldn't see what they were wearing. And then suddenly that became more and more games on TV. ESPN was a big part of that. Kids could start to see what shoes were out there, and they say, how come we're not seeing these? How come I don't have these? Yeah, that was, when people would call for a white and orange Air Jordan, the local store, I've never seen one, don't know it. Oh, we can get it to you in 3 days. That was a change for them. But it was the whole right place, right time.
Really was the right shoe. The Jordan was really the first shoe that really polarized all of our customers that we saw going out to schools, is because half the people hated it and half the people loved it. So they were actually starting to talk to each other to say, why did you buy that? That's, and just back and forth. And that really led to the people getting involved in shoes and making shoes a part of who they are.
I think for my generation, I'm 45 years old. So in the 90s was when I was in middle school and high school. And for my generation, the pumps were the big shoe that every kid wanted. The ones that had the little basketball you'd pump to apparently put air in your shoe to make you jump higher. And I know Jordans were obviously still a big thing, but that was the thing. And I'll never forget my dad at a store looking at those with me. He goes, "That's the ugliest and stupidest thing I've ever seen in my life." And, you talk about how there is this, there are people that love things and hate things, and there's the balance. But that was the one for me that, looking back on it, that definitely had the most push and pull, I think, with the shoes.
That was a great shoe. It was a big shoe for us too.
I can only imagine how big that shoe was for every retailer. Honestly, I mean, if you had one of those, you were the coolest kid in school until somebody else got one, and then you shifted, I guess. I don't know if this is a quote from the book, but I made this in my notes. It says, "The heart and soul of the whole thing was to give kids options they had never seen before." And I don't know if that's an exact quote from the book, but that hit me in such a good way. Like, you really were just trying to get things out to kids that didn't have the opportunities necessarily. And I love that was the motivation for everything.
Well, and a little bit of background behind that is maybe you even, it was part of our growing up and maybe a part of yours too, but the schools used to supply shoes. And
Definitely not for me.
And the shoes they
Chuck Taylors.
Yeah. And the shoes they supplied were designed more for longevity than they were for performance, because the school couldn't buy new shoes every year. And so once you get past the school supplying and now the kids have to find their own, it really just changed the whole dynamic of the athletic industry. And we just got lucky to be there in the front row seat to watch it happen, because as much as we grew up, the athletic shoe companies grew up. Mm-hmm. They changed dramatically in how they worked, what they did, who they hired, who worked for them, and how they marketed themselves and created the brand.
Yeah, I don't have the entire quote written down, but there's one in the prologue of your book, which people can read right now if they want, at bookofeastbay.com. But there's a book where you talk about the role that you played, often unwittingly, in the transformation of the shoe business and the culture of young athletes and sneakers. I mean, you were doing something that you found really interesting and exciting, and you were helping kids primarily and young athletes get the shoes they needed, but you really were at the forefront of altering the business of shoes as a whole.
The sneaker industry, certainly called a sneakerhead industry, really started in New York and the big cities and that. We just happened to kind of spread it around the United States to everyone. They could see the latest product every month. Wait by you'd have an unboxing at your mailbox every month with a new drop, and you'd see all the new shoes. But we took it to every little town there was in the United States. So it got to be, I think a little bit like Johnny Appleseed. We just kept spreading the seeds of all the cool things that were out there. And we were so lucky to be part of that.
I miss mail order catalogs, because when I was in high school, I think about it, we had Eastbay. I can't think of the name of it now, but there was like a skateboard mail order catalog that we all had that we loved to look through. I was really big into the punk rock world then too, and punk rock really survived off of mail order catalogs because they just couldn't get their records into major stores around the country. Mail order, I know the convenience of the internet now. I get it. Now, I'm not one of those guys. It's like, I'll never, but there was something special about getting that catalog in the mail, just perusing through it at your own pace, making the phone call to order something. There was something special about having to go through all that work to get the thing that you wanted.
They're coming back.
Oh,
Amazon had their first toy catalog this year,
which was a nightmare for me.
You're seeing even my wife this year. Our wives grew up with catalog, because that's kind of what we did. And this whole last Christmas season, we got probably 5 to 6 times more catalogs than we ever have. So the touchy-feely going at your own pace is making an impact, because you can tell more about a product when you can compare it to other products. And I think that's one of the things that we accomplished within Eastbay, is that we didn't push one brand. We just said, here they all are, and you look at what you like and what's important to you, and you can compare one against the other and make a choice that makes you feel good.
Yeah, you would write descriptions for each shoe. And in the book, you talk about how people who got shoes from Eastbay were getting better info from the catalog than they would even get in a store, which I thought was really interesting. Like the time and effort you put into explaining what the shoe was, what it could do for you, what the, was it a wide sole, whatever the situation you did it. You took the effort to do that, to explain it for the people that were getting their hands on the catalog.
Because we focused on the athletes and we went out to them directly early on to the schools and fitting them, and that's what they wanted. It really, we weren't geniuses. We just listened to our customer and tried to do the best job in giving them what they wanted. So
we had people on staff like like guy we ran with, and that he was what's called a true size for the companies was 8.5 men, 7 women. So we had a couple of those people on staff and they would try on every shoe that came out and say, this fits small, this one fits large, this one's really good. And of course we'd weigh every shoe, which one's the lightest shoe out there.
Well, you have to, especially when you're working at, running and athletic shoes. You got to make sure you got the weight out there for sure.
Looking for every edge you can find, that's for sure.
Absolutely. Oh my gosh. There was on the line that was interesting where you were talking about, you're a few years into having Eastbay now. You've kind of just started to launch the mail order catalog, if you will. But you had this line that said the top line looked so promising, the bottom line was not. You were talking about how you guys weren't making any money. Maybe you were paying yourselves like $20 a week at that point, but you were still having a growing staff and things looked so promising for the company, but it still hadn't clicked yet. When was the moment that you knew that this was going to be something that would have longevity?
Wow.
I think when Dick Johnson was running it after we sold it. And Dick Johnson later was our VP, and then he became president of Eastbay after we left, and then later he became president of Foot Locker. So I think that everything kept going, but no, there were some things along the way that you just. In 1987, where you have to tell people, what we put in the catalog, please don't call for a catalog, because you're growing so fast that you just can't keep up with it. And that was always a problem for us, because we started with $4,000. When you're having 40% or early days, double growth, triple growth, but even later when you're getting bigger and you're having 40% growth, just having enough cash to keep it going is a really hard thing to do. We didn't know that. We probably got 15 years of college between us. Neither one of us have ever taken a business class. So we learned that later.
But don't you think it was right around the time that we started doing some strategy work with Harry?
Yep.
And that's when we really realized that, if we were going to scale this thing and keep it going, that we'd have to make some changes and bring in some people who have some actual experience in running companies. Because we were really, at the time, we were really a flat company. It was Art and I, and everyone reported to us. And we all did the same. We were on the phones, we were shipping, we were pulling shoes. Maybe not as much as some of the other people, but I mean, everybody did everything. And
we were slower.
Yeah, we were much slower, so they kicked us out, that's for sure.
Yeah, we were about 30 million, and Rick, we had no titles, we had no budget, no business plan whatsoever. We just said our mission is to get the young kids in high school great shoes. And everyone just worked towards that.
You mentioned college art, and I loved the story in the book about when Rick decided he needed to graduate from college, and he asked you for help, I think it was, to say, like, how can I make this happen? How can I finish college? And you were like, you could have finished 2 years ago.
But not a business class.
But not a business class.
Rick loved, he was a track athlete. He loved running track, and it was so great for him. And he was enjoying himself. So I must admit, and he would work, he worked a lot. He was one of the first workers at Disney World when it opened up. And we didn't have a lot of money, so he might have to work a year and then he'd come back to schools, but he just never really followed that so much, and probably neither one of us did too much.
Looking for the dream, and finally it came. So.
Yeah. But that's what I love about stories like yours, because, I'm not trying to diminish it at all, but like there was a plan, you had an idea, but there wasn't a long-term plan. You even talk about in the book, there were a lot of short-term goals you were trying to hit. It wasn't really a long game. It was very short game. And I love that you were able to continue following that with your passion. And even though you had ups and downs and you had moments where you were like, I don't know what's going on right now, or how do we take this to the next step? You still found a way to make it work, and you still were enjoying yourselves, and you found something that you were passionate about. I think those are the stories that really They make me happy and they inspire me because it means that you can just kind of say, hey, I want to make this happen and find your way to do it.
Oh, well, thanks. And you know, part of it is having, we worked real hard early on until we got to the point where we couldn't hire just athletes all the time. We needed more people.
Or siblings.
And siblings. Good point. Thank you.
They did a great job.
And yeah, unbelievable. But they made it easy because they understood the athlete too. And so I think when you listen to your customer, they're going to tell you if you're going the right direction or if you're not going the right direction. And everybody bought into the vision and were just really good at putting their heart and soul into it. And we can't thank them enough. But it all comes back to just listening to your customer. They'll tell you what you like, what they like, and what they don't like. And you have to be nimble enough to be able to change direction at a moment's notice. And that's one of the things that I think that we're most proud of, is that we had probably, 8 or 9 different business plans through the time that we were there. And we were willing to listen and be nimble enough to change and go the direction that we thought the customer was telling us.
There's been a big push for me lately. I don't know why, but I've been really interested in just pop culture. And maybe it's because pop culture isn't the same today as it was 30, 40 years ago, because people have different worlds they live in through their phones nowadays, and it's not everybody huddled around the TV to watch the final episode of Cheers or whatever it is. But you say in the book, at some point at the peak, some 40 to 50 million copies of Eastbay were sent all over the world every year. I mean, when you want to talk about something that made an impact in the world of pop culture, I mean, Eastbay is right there near the top of it. It's what a brand name. I mean, 40 to 50 million copies being sent out around the world, but then you got to imagine there's 10 kids huddled around one copy in a high school looking at all the shoes that they want to get. It's just amazing. I feel so proud for you that you were able to have this kind of impact that will hopefully be a lasting impact for many years.
We would get so many calls where someone would call saying, a teacher took my copy away of my catalog. Can you send me a new one? So
I lost a few that way.
It's like, you're losing your phone today.
Oh, I definitely lost a few that way. I know with this book, I want to make sure we talk about this because I don't know if you can see it. I'm wearing a shirt that talks about St. Jude Children's Research Hospital. Childhood cancer and childhood health is such an important thing to me as well. But I know the proceeds of this book are going to a charitable organization. Do you want to talk a little bit about that?
Well, it's called Little Warriors Cancer Research Fund. And it goes, for research for children's cancer, particularly Ewing sarcoma. One of the things I've learned, it's actually my nephew's daughter who got it a number of years ago, 4 or 5 years ago. Thank God she's still, she's doing well. But it's just something that you learn about children's cancer, and you realize that all the money on research is being spent for adult cancer. No one's ever spending anything on children's because there's just not enough people that get it. And so they're stuck with doing procedures that are from the 1970s, basically. When we started Eastbay, 1980, and just hasn't gone anywhere. So I think, for any child who gets that, as a parent, you're just like, it's got to be devastating. Yeah, so that's probably why we decided to go that way.
Well, and it tugs at your heartstrings because so many of these kids don't get diagnosed until they break their leg or break something or hurt something while they're playing sports or just playing at home. And without having that incident happen, they may never have got diagnosed until it's too late to cure it. So these poor kids thought they were going to be soccer stars or basketball stars, and they find out they have cancer. And their whole life changes completely. Where we do wins or losses by how many points you score. These kids just want to play the game again, and they may never get a chance to do that.
The story of Eastbay starts with you guys trying to help out kids, and here you are, all these years later, still trying to help kids with the story of Eastbay, and I think that's a really fitting way to do it. If people want to find out more about the book, they want to learn more about your story, where should they go?
We have a website right now called bookofeastbay.com. And as you mentioned before, we started going directly to the kids, and so we thought we would put our prologue on the website so that if somebody wants to get a sampling of what the book might read like or feel like to see if they're interested, they can read the prologue and hopefully enjoy it enough that they go out and buy a book. Still trying to go directly to the customer. That's the secret.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, reading the prologue secured for me that I was very excited for this book. Just reading the way you guys were talking about the story, I was like, I'm in. I'm ready to go through the whole thing. I haven't finished the book yet. I apologize. I'm a painfully slow reader, but I do look forward to finishing it to get there to the end of the story, if you will. But Art, I've waited this long in the conversation to say it because I've been terrified to say your last name. Is it Judes?
If you were a nun, yes, all the nuns called me Judas. It's Juedes.
Juedes, Art Juedes and Rick Gering.
Yeah.
The book is called The Book of Eastbay, Two Friends and the Catalog That Changed the Sneaker Business Forever. Guys, thank you so much for your time. Thank you for sharing the story. I know we focused a lot about the earlier years in this conversation, but there's still so much more in the book for readers to pick up and learn how the company shifted and changed as it continued on, and in the later years of the company as well. But guys, I thank you for all the work. You know, the younger me is very thankful to have those catalogs and the joy that it brought me and my friends all those years ago, finding the favorite shoes that my parents never bought for me, but it still brought a light to our day. So thank you for everything you've done over the years.
Well, you're welcome, Jeff. Thank you.
Thank you for what you do. I'm sure you're inspiring people every day. So congratulations.
I hope so. That's always the hope. If one person listens and finds some enjoyment in there, then I feel like my day is successful.
Yeah, I bought 3 books last night listening to your podcast. So.
You know what? I'm impressed you listened to it. Most guests don't actually listen. They're like, what is this for? And I'm like, oh, all right, well, I'll tell you a little bit about it.
I love the Rick Reese one. That was great.
Yeah.
Oh, that was a good one. That was a fun one. Big thank you to Art Juedes and Rick Gering. Their book is called The Book of Eastbay, Two Friends and the Catalog That Changed the Sneaker Business Forever. It's available now, and it was a real trip down memory lane for me. Those guys have seen a lot over their career. If you want to check out more details, you can also find it at bookofeastbay.com, but you can also find it probably wherever you get your books. And thank you to all of you for listening to this episode of the Adult Education Podcast. Until next time, be well.